just gave him a short list of what foods he could really focus on. And 2 months later, he came back and his A1C was back in the normal range, and he was so excited about it.
Sarah, how did you find carnivore?
I think the best way to answer that is basically like many of the, um, people that you've interviewed all along the way, that it was a long journey. Um, and it sort of came in through the route of keto. I had a coworker who did Atkins, I'm going to say 20 years ago, and she lost a remarkable amount of weight during that um, during that period, and she still does do the keto um, to varying degrees even now. And if she puts on a little weight, then she digs her heels in and goes back to whatever that plan is. I never have done keto or Atkins. I I am a nurse, and so I was very skeptical, but she's also a nurse, so I guess I would say over those 20 years, I was just waiting to watch her keel over or something because, it couldn't possibly be good for anybody to be in ketosis all the time. And so with that, I just kind of was watching. Then I would say a few years ago, um, well, actually more than a few years, I really had a health crisis of my own. And the doctors tried a lot of different things, a lot of different medications and procedures and surgeries, and um, they just couldn't give me any answers. They couldn't even really give me a true diagnosis. So then I was um, placed in this umbrella or under this umbrella diagnosis of chronic pain. And um, with that, I just felt very, um, I don't even know what the right word would be. Of course, very disappointed, but y- you always believe, or at least I did, and many of the people that I work with and the patients I've had over the years believe that the doctors can find and pinpoint what's wrong and give you a diagnosis and then give you that pill or treatment and you get better. And so I found myself in a position where um, I actually lost every ounce of faith I had in what doctors could do. And it was a point of enlightenment for me because I was in the shoes of some of the people I took care of over the years were in. Um, and in a way, it helped me change how I viewed things when I took care of my patients. Um, and I also um, started really looking in other areas then for answers, for different uh, alternative modalities for treatment and for relief. And of course, one of those alternative modalities was diet. That was one thing that doctors never really asked or talked about. And at that point, when I really started looking at the diet, one thing I would say, my dad was a farmer, and he always had a very keen interest in organic farming. He wasn't ever able to do organic farming, but he really researched it out, even did go to some organic farms to see how they operated and what they did differently, to see if it was something that was he could hopefully convert over to. And the reason he did that was because his mother died when he was 17 of colon cancer. And that would have been in the early 50s, I believe. And there were no treatments for cancer at that time. And they basically diagnosed her and sent her home to die. And she did pass away in about a month later, I believe. So my dad talked to me at length about organic farming, and he felt the chemicals his dad put on the fields had a big impact on my grandma getting sick because my grandpa was a crop duster. So it wasn't that he was just spreading chemicals on his own fields, he was doing it for his neighbors and um, the people that lived in the area where my dad grew up. So he always felt there was a connection there. So as a child, I heard those terms and the idea of organic farming and that. So that was one of the areas where I really started looking was the food. And initially, I was looking at vitamins and supplements, and I probably have spent more money on supplements or more supplements over the year and could have saved a lot of money, but you do what you know or in what's available at the time. Um, but at one point, and I don't even know really how far into the search this was, I really started looking at gluten because gluten-free foods were coming out on the market. So I bought a couple books about celiac disease and gluten intolerances and things like that. The one thing I would say when I really first started removing the wheat out of my diet, initially I didn't notice necessarily a really big change. Um, so I wasn't too sure about that as far as being a positive change. But the other things that I kept hearing about were more vegetables and more fruits and less meat. And of course, being a nurse, we hear about the guidelines all the time. And that's part of what you do is you help educate your patients. So I I went very vegetable and fruit and grain heavy for a long time. I wasn't a vegetarian, but I certainly was a vegetable or, very vegetable plant heavy diet. Along with that, a lot of the oils in the diet as well. The seed oils were a big thing. Um, Eliminating the fats out of the diet, animal products in general. And I would say I did that for at least 15 years and still just didn't see any great changes. And so with that was a lot of disappointment. Um,
So just to clarify that, so like 15 years later, you're still dealing with all the pain that you were dealing with before.
right, right. So then um, I would say probably about 3 years ago now, Uh, I came across a book that was titled No Brain, No Pain. It was written by Dr. Osborne, and he's a chiropractor, I believe. And right around the same time, I was listening to some podcasts by Dr. Tina Moore. She is a chiropractor as well. And one of her podcasts early on that she was doing was about finding pain relief. So I started listening to her, not necessarily routinely, but would pick up here and there whenever the subject would strike my interest or whatever. And one day I was in the car, I was traveling somewhere, probably to one of my doctor appointments, and I was listening to her, and she said, well, one place where she always would encourage her patients to start if they had deep underlying pain that they were not finding relief was to add more protein into their diets, especially animal-based proteins. And that's kind of where the light bulb went on that, I've been doing this for so many years and eating very little meat, lots of vegetables, lots of grains, lots of fruits, um, doing the seed oils and all the things that they the government and the guidelines taught taught us to do. And I thought, well, I am just going to give it a try. So that would have been August of 23 that I started adding in more proteins. So then, watching different things on YouTube. Now, Dr. Moore was not on YouTube at that point in time. She had a lot of restrictions through the pandemic and um, got blocked. A lot of her things were blocked. But then Dr. Boz popped up in the algorithm. So I started watching some of her videos. And of course, she's a ketogenic doctor, or she supports a ketogenic diet. And that's where I really learned the therapeutic side of ketosis and the importance of the animal products, not just the protein, but the fats and how they work in our bodies and what they do, and also how dangerous and damaging the seed oils are. So, and that was all within about a month's time in August of 2023. So that's where I really started adding protein back into my diet. And that's when I really noticed, I would say within about a month, I noticed things were changing. Now, I didn't have a grand and glorious, all of a sudden my pain is gone. In fact, I still deal with it every day. However, um, the biggest change I noticed was my mental health and clarity, um, and my sleep. I started sleeping for the first time in years. I was able to get a good night's sleep. Um, and I noticed things like my nails were um, healthy. My nails would break off really easily. They were soft. They just were not what good healthy fingernails should look like. And little things like that kind of bothered me along the way because I know that your skin, your hair, and your nails are indicators as far as what is going on the inside as well. And when I really noticed, like, my fingernails were growing in stronger and, um, my hair was growing in as well, um, and I noticed that I didn't feel this level of almost not despair, because I would never say it felt like that, but it just seemed like um, my days were easier as far as my mental health. Um, but then I would say 2 to 3 months into the just adding and going switching from plant-based, I switched completely then over to animal-based, and really thought, well, I've been now watching and seeing, um, all the different doctors with the carnivore diet. So one leads to another on YouTube. And what was interesting is so many people that you've interviewed bring up Dr. Barry. Well, I had watched him before the pandemic, but I was watching him, like his educational videos on lab values and um, different medications and how they can affect your thinking and your sleep, and just little 7, 10, 15-minute videos, just because they were interesting and had just bits of information that were good for me as a patient, but as a nurse, because he really broke things down to a really clear, understandable level. So I had kind of been watching his videos, and but I don't recall ever seeing one where he was talking about diet or losing weight or carnivore or keto. So, uh, by the end of 2023, though, he was coming up in the browser in the algorithm quite often, and of course, Dr. Baker, Dr. Chafee, and that's where I really, really started paying attention to the carnivore diet. And by the end of 2023, I realized that I probably, if I ate a slice of bread, it was once a week at the most. And I realized that I had kind of just stopped eating it because when I ate bread or I ate a bun or whatever, the next day I really paid for it and really was uncomfortable, and it it was a definite struggle.
It's very when you've got it out completely, and then you have those times where you have one kind of test, it's
Yeah,
very clear that it's the problem after that, right?
it is, yes. So that's when I really realized that, well, maybe I should start looking at some of these vegetables that I was still eating. And of course, when you're getting close to the end of the year and Christmas is coming around, I'm thinking, "Oh, wow, do I wanna do this through the holidays?" And I thought, "Well, why not?" We always have a couple different types of meat on the table. Somebody usually brings cheese and sausage, and so, between the cheese trays and just those types of things, why not just see if we can get through the holiday without eating anything that's gonna trigger? And I realized I had no desire to eat anything that was on the table other than the meats and the cheeses, and, um, probably didn't realize at that point yet how much dairy was affecting me as well, but it those were the options that I had, and I had no cravings for the cookies or the pies or anything that was served. And we always set up like a buffet style so that nobody really, from what I could tell, seemed to notice. And so it was kind of nice getting through the holidays without all the pain and
I think
agony.
I think if you can get through the holidays, then you can get through anything, right?
Right, right. So that would, so then that meant January of 24, I felt, well, might as well just keep going forward with this and see if some of that underlying the underlying pain that was such a problem, if that would get better. Now, at this point in time, it hasn't, but I also realize how much lighter I feel. I'm lighter on my feet. I can go up the steps. I don't get winded as easily as I did before. Um, there's just been so many positives with it. Um, I have, and I can say that I am still very hopeful that I'm moving in the right direction, that someday this will get better. I do believe I know um, what is causing it, and it's one of those things where it's just going to be a matter of time for things to continue to improve. So even though even though it's still there, I don't have all the IBS along with it now. I don't have the joint pain along with it now. I don't have the sleepless nights along with it now. So everything is so much better. I still have bad days, but I get through those days easier now.
And given that everything is moving in the right direction, that's a good sign, right?
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Being
Yeah.
able um to make plans and not worry that, oh, 2 weeks from now we're doing something with the grandkids or we're making a trip to go see the grandchildren that are 4 hours away, and I don't worry now about the road trip like I did before. It's easier to do. And so just able to plan those things better. I also have been able to work longer days at work and more days. I still do have to be careful that I don't do too many days in a row. Um, I actually work a job where I pick my schedule. I pick the days that I work and the hours that I work, which has been, oh, that's been a, a big bonus so that I'm not locked into a block schedule where maybe on day 3 I'm just um oh, I've overdone it, or I've worked so many hours that the pain gets so bad that I'm just grinding my teeth to get through a day. So I don't have to look at a work schedule that is daunting necessarily. I still have days where I get to work and I ask myself, what was I thinking? Anyway, but I at least am at a point where if I know the next morning I have to be up early and get ready and plan on an 8-hour day, I know that I can do it now. Um,
So regarding your work,
yes,
are you nursing in a general hospital? Like you're seeing patients of all different types? Or?
I work in a nursing home, uh, like a care home, a rehab center. I would say probably 60 to 80% of our patients do their rehab after, say, a hip surgery or a stroke or um, a heart procedure. They rehab for a couple weeks to months and then they move on. That would be 60, at least 60% of our patients do that. I think it's closer to 70 or 80% now. And then we have that small population that's there as a long-term care. What's interesting is for 18 years, I did wound care. And through the process, I've been a nurse for 30 years, and I've seen a lot of changes in our healthcare system over those 30 years. And through the process of time, um, and all those different changes, especially when I was doing wound care, it always puzzled me why I would have these patients that just never healed. They would have these chronic wounds, and it was week after week after week, and they just never healed. We had some that did, and but there was always that one group of patients, um, whether it was their age or whatever. Well, now um, I'm pretty confident that it's because they didn't get enough protein in their diets, for one thing, and they were on very carb-heavy diets, and I'm sure that's a big factor, especially for people nowadays who are either pre-diabetic or, legitimately diagnosed with diabetes. So, but yeah, I saw a lot. I love my job as in wound care. That was one of my favorite things that I did. Um, the reason I loved it so much was the challenge of it, but also when you're working on dressings with a patient and they're complicated, you spend time with those people, and that is the one area of nursing where you actually could spend actual time with the people you were taking care of. And so I always enjoyed that. But it was always disheartening to have people have these wounds that just would never heal. So,
Yeah, it's yeah, and I guess that is only a problem that's going to increase over
yeah.
the coming years unless we put our foot on the brake very, very hard.
Right, right. Yeah, the statistics right now are so bad in any of the developed world. Um, when you look at those numbers with uh, the population that's pre-diabetic or diabetic, and the number of people in the population, young people who are already obese, it is very discouraging if you look at the numbers for sure.
Yeah. Um, so for you personally, you're still working on things, but you've had a lot of improvements since Christmas of 23 when you got started.
Mhm.
How have what have you fallen into as a pattern of how you're eating day to day? Like how many times and what are the meals made up of?
Okay. What I find most days is I eat twice a day. I've never been like an early morning breakfast eater. Uh, I would say usually I usually eat by 10 or 11 o'clock. And the second meal of the day probably falls around 5 or 6 p.m. My meals are primarily um, in the mornings. eggs, bacon, um, and, in the evenings, I do a lot of either, like, ground beef, shaved steaks, things like that, um, or even, like, a chuck roast, just a good old-fashioned roast. I'm not we don't eat, I wouldn't say we put steaks on very often. I like steaks, but, a lot of it is the cost, and, uh, but primarily ground beef and eggs.
Yeah.
Um, I also have found along the way that I do benefit from even some just like salad greens. I can't I really can't do, any of the brassicas, really. I get just such a stomach of gas and discomfort with those vegetables. But, is I don't even know how to explain when I would do that. I can just tell I just need that little bit of variety, and
Okay, so it's just a variety thing.
right.
It's not like to help with, IBS or anything like
No,
that. Or
no, no, not at all. And then I will, do berries when the berries are in season. Um, I will occasionally, um, if my legs start to feel crampy, or I get this little muscle twitch by my eyes sometimes when my electrolytes are off. So at that time, I'll eat a banana. But it is just strictly because I know the electrolytes are off, and it usually calms everything down and I'm fine. But that's very occasional. I haven't tried I really haven't tried a lot with like electrolytes. I just use salt.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same. Like, I've got stuff there, but I'm too lazy to use it, so it's pretty much salt is all I'm having. Um, so you said "we," so your husband's there with you. Is he following this with you, or is he just doing his own thing?
Um, he has he has scaled back on the carbs for sure. Yeah. He's there are days he still wants a bag of popcorn, or, a toast in the mornings and that. So yeah, he has carbs in his diet every day, but he has scaled back significantly too.
Nice. And how about other people around you? Has anyone commented about it? Are you still working with the nurse friend that kind of introduced you to the idea of Atkins keto?
Well, no, actually I haven't. She retired probably 8 years ago at least. And so kind of lost touch with her. But I do see her Facebook profile now and then, and I can tell following, um, she's still following it. As far as other people around me, my brother and I, it's funny, he lives 23 hours away. It's a 23-hour drive to get to his house. But he and I both started sharing podcasts and different things back and forth, and realized that we were kind of on the same journey doing the same things. And um, I don't think he's necessarily carnivore, but he's definitely uh, animal heavy in his diet and that. And just looking at things in general in a different light as far as seeing that we don't like he's watching his A1C now and doing some things like that too. Um, Interestingly, I volunteer and do nails for the seniors and disabled in our community. And I have one patient there who was telling me about his fears because at whatever age he is, I'm going to say in his 70s, his doctor told him, "You're pre-diabetic, and if we don't get things changed, you'll be diabetic very soon." And the doctor wanted to put him on medication. And so as I'm working on his feet and getting his nails taken care of, I said, "Well, this is what I'm doing." And I just gave him a short list of what foods he could really focus on. And 2 months later, he came back and his A1C was back in the normal range. And he was so excited about it. He said, "I'm not diabetic anymore." So that was really encouraging. And he said, "Well, I'm going to keep doing what you said." He said, "I'm going to keep eating that way and keep exercising." So that was really good. I do have a son-in-law, and I talked to him about it because I know um, I noticed on their he's the cook in the family, and I noticed on their refrigerator a recipe for something keto. And I thought, "Oh, well, he's must be exploring some different options." So I did talk to him about it, and he and I had a good discussion about it. And he said he would choose to be animal based, but not full on carnivore because of his work life and schedule and things. Um, but I also have a um, when when my parents, before they started their own family, they had a young man that lived with them, and they were uh, kind of like a foster parent, but not in the official sense. Okay, and he worked on the farm with my dad and that, and he's always been considered a big brother to myself and my siblings. Well, his wife and daughter are strict. Well, his daughter is strict no carbs as well. And I just actually found out on Sunday that she was zero carb. So I haven't had a chance to really sit down and talk to her yet, but uh, I I do want to just get together with her and compare notes. So
That's cool. It's really spreading, right?
it is, and it's
Yeah.
encouraging. It's
Yeah.
encouraging. And then it's funny to hear other people talk about, "Oh, that keto diet. Oh, those people that eat only meat," and there are people out there just have nothing good to say about it. Um, Even within my own friend circle, I have people that they just don't know that that's what I'm doing, and they'll make negative comments about it. I just sit and don't contribute to the conversation. Let them think what they think, and maybe someday if they ask, then I'll share.
Yeah. So if someone came to you and said, "Look, I wanna give this a try. I've realized that you're doing carnivore and I wanna try it myself too. How should I get started?" What would you recommend?
I would I would recommend um just pick a date and do it. Um I know in the beginning I really thought I was going to have to gradually work the carbs out. I did try that for a stretch. It wasn't the easiest thing to do though. Um I think it's just better just to make a decision, but plan on what you are going to eat. Make sure that you, on that day that you decide to start, have a plan on what your what your food is going to look like, and plan on doing it at least for a couple weeks, if not 30 days.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. I think the not running out of the food that you're gonna eat, especially on day 1, is very
Yeah,
important, right? You don't wanna be
yeah,
hungry at any point during that first
right.
day.
And I think I was worried because I knew there were gonna be carbs in the house, but I learned early on that um as long as I started with the meat when we sat down to a meal and I ate the meat first and then started feeling like, "Oh, I'm not really so hungry anymore," then there wasn't the temptation to put the carbs on the plate. So many times, especially in America, if you go out to eat, they bring you bread and a salad to start with, always, and that's the first thing that gets passed around. And if you're if you don't have that to start with, if you start with your protein or your fats, um, I realized right away that, oh, those carbs just don't really have an appeal anymore. And that helped with the fact that I was in a home where the carbs were still going to be present and available.
Yeah,
So
that's a great point. Yeah, so, Sarah, if people wanna reach out to you, do you have any way of getting in contact?
just my email at this point. Yeah,
Okay. No worries, I'll put your email in the show notes.
that's
Thank you
fine.
so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Dave. It was nice meeting you, and I really appreciate what you're doing. Um, I want to say that through uh, through all the different platforms that are out there, the one thing that I have heard over and over again is to find a community that supports you. And it's kind of hard to find that community because it isn't the most popular thing right yet. It's getting better, definitely. And I really felt that by following the stories that you put up on your platform, that helped create a sense of community. And that was very beneficial. It was something that really did help me a lot along the journey as well. It's always encouraging when you can hear other people share their positive stories. So thank you for doing that.